Fantastic. Thank you, Adrian, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm David Golembiewski, David G, here at Landing AI. I'm a digital transformation specialist, part of the go-to-market team. One of the things we'll be talking about is how your unstructured visual data is a potential gold mine in the realm of life sciences. And my personal goal of today's call, I hope to evoke ideas in your mind for how your specific visual inspection tasks in your business can benefit from large vision models. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Erik. Erik, take it away.
Hey, David. Thanks so much. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So we'll get started from here. I'm like David, a go-to-market team member here at Landing AI, and I'm going to start with an introduction to Landing AI and what we mean by LVMs. So let's begin with imagery and the prevalence of a wide variety of image types in life sciences and healthcare in general. Um, Images can be sourced from video or DICOM. These could be images that you capture as part of your manufacturing or commercialization process, or like you see here, some of the images that begin with the R&D and discovery phase of life sciences. Thanks, David. So who's Landing AI and how do we fit into this? Well, first and foremost, we build, deploy, and scale computer vision solutions. We do that with our Landing Lens platform. It's an end-to-end computer vision platform that allows you to build, iterate, and deploy those models anywhere. And we are increasingly at the forefront of building large vision models. These are domain-specific foundation models that will help you build downstream use cases more effectively. So moving more quickly from a proof of concept to a production deployment. And so let's talk a little bit about the types of images and how they align to the various stages of life science development. So within R&D, it's pretty common that you would see fluorescence in microscopy imagery. You could be doing sequencing for biomarkers. You'll see neuroimaging. Often that's used to derive early clinical insights from some of the basic research you're doing. You might see live cell imaging like you did on the prior image here. And then through the clinical development process, again, it's radiology, ultrasound, nuclear medicine. You'll see lots of histopathology and cytology for studying the efficacy of various drugs. And imagery evidence is also prevalent as part of the regulatory process. And then as you commercialize and launch new products, of course, you have significant requirements around manufacturing quality control. So whether this would be a medical device or a pharmaceutical product, packaging, wide range of manufacturing quality use cases. You'll also see high content screening and consistency and efficacy of the delivered products, and do post-market surveillance with imagery as well.
Thanks, Erik. So, breaking it down a bit, how can we perform those tasks and how can you, leverage our platform? Landing Lens is our flagship general purpose off-the-shelf computer vision platform. We serve many disparate industries for visual inspection tasks like object detection, segmentation, classification, optical character recognition, and so on. We're trusted by large medical device manufacturers, automakers around the world, and many others for disparate, consequential visual inspection tasks. So what are those tasks? Whoops. Data management. So we offer, as part of our platform, consensus-driven labeling for even the most subjective defects or classes of things you want to find in your images. For instance, burrs on implantable surgical screws. Model training can be achieved by the click of a button. This empowers subject matter experts to build AI models yourselves. We do have advanced options available for data scientists and machine learning engineers, but you don't need to be one to build AI models and reap the benefits of them with Landing Lens. As well, we offer deployment management. You can run inference in the cloud, at the edge, or entirely on-prem. We make managing those deployments a breeze with Landing Lens. So what are some of the barriers to adopting AI in 2024 in your business? Number one, Unutilized data is a potential gold mine for medical and pharmaceutical companies. This unstructured visual data, you've amassed it perhaps over the last many years. Landing Lens off the shelf offers a generic foundation model that helps you get to 90 to 99%, say, performative models in terms of precision and recall. As you'll hear in a moment, large vision models can help you eke out even better performance. At the end of the day, it's about zero escapes. Some of the most consequential use cases are those dealing with human life. So we're proud to be working with folks like yourselves in the industry. Inconsistent performance is another challenge faced by businesses in terms of adopting AI. You need many resources, both compute and people, to achieve consistent performance. The development of AI is time consuming. Tasks like labeling are expensive when subject matter experts like radiologists have to spend hours to days labeling sets of image data. And finally, a lot of projects get stuck in the POC stage. That development, deployment, managing models when something changes, that can cause the projects to get stuck and never reach valuable deployment where you're reaping the benefits.
Yeah, thanks, David. So as David points out, there's a lot of challenges around computer vision in life sciences, and then more broadly within vision models themselves, it's not a one size fits all for every use case or every industry. In fact, and you can advance this, David. If you think about medical devices, that those types of images are going to look different than, say, live cell imaging or histopathology. And for the downstream use cases that you would build around each of these domains, there's typically a pretty high burden in terms of the types of labels that might need to be created. So ultimately, what you're really looking for is a large vision model that allows you to create greater accuracy with a lower level of effort. And that's, in fact, what we mean by LVM. So a large vision model is trained on a significant number of data points, typically orders of magnitude greater than a downstream use case that you would build in our typical our platform. But as a result, any of the downstream use cases that leverage the LVM will perform much better. They'll converge much faster, and they'll reduce the amount of effort required for creating labels. And often that labeling effort means subject matter expertise, and people have very busy days. So as a result, it generates significant savings, often orders of magnitude greater than the investment in the LVM, especially if you start to consider multiple use cases. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean when we say domain-specific large vision model. So first and foremost, as I mentioned a moment ago, the domain is a category of images, and it's much larger than what we would do if we were training a model in our Landing Lens platform today. So what we do is we utilize an unsupervised learning approach. So there's no labeling required to actually train the LVM itself. But you don't interact directly with the LVM. Instead, what you do is you interact with downstream vision tasks. So we do that by creating fine-tuned models, and that can be done in a number of different ways, including in the Landing Lens platform. And each of those will do a certain thing. So as an example, you could have a classification model, you could do density prediction or image retrieval. Ultimately, those downstream use cases benefit from the generalized learning of the LVM itself.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a little bit more about each of those potential downstream visual inspection tasks and how you'd be able to use the large vision model. Just to reiterate a couple of points that Erik said, the large vision model is trained in an unsupervised manner. We need at least 500,000 unlabeled images. Again, that massive image treasure trove you've probably been amassing over the last years, we can extract value from it. Each large vision model is built for individual customers. They're tailored to you on your data. And as Erik said, the large vision model does not inherently do the downstream tasks like classification, dense prediction. It's used as a foundation to build those tasks later. And finally, those downstream applications, they're small and they're fast enough to run on the edge. So without further ado, some of those downstream use cases include classification. So take an example of cancerous cells versus normal cells, or nodules in a chest X-ray. The large vision model, its whole world, its whole domain are similar images of those cells, of those lung X-ray scans. The large vision model is used as a foundation, and we attach a classification head and apply some fine tuning. So only 10 to 30% as much labeled image data is required because that foundation model it only knows the world of your images. Another task is density prediction. So it's better performance than supervised learning for tasks like counting nodules. It can save a great deal of time compared to manual segmentation labeling using a generic foundation model. Another one, image retrieval or retrieval augmented generation. We can use an image as a prompt to interrogate your entire image data set for similar images. The way we do this is by getting the feature vectors, and then we return neighbors with the highest cosine similarity. The large vision model retrieves that visual data based on the defect or background. For instance, stained cells that contain tumors.
Yeah, and
Eric.
so yep, and so ultimately fine tuning these downstream tasks leads to faster models, faster model creation, and often a much cheaper ability to bring a model to production. And so it really comes down to the amount of time that's required. When you build an LVM, there's an upfront investment in time and energy to build this generalized understanding of the domain. But when you get to the fine tuning, that's typically done in days or weeks for each of those individual use cases. So one way to think about it is if you have an LVM in a specific domain with a number of downstream use cases, each additional use case is going to be brought to market with higher level of performance, faster, typically orders of magnitude faster than it would have been otherwise if you did it without the LVM. And today, in the Landing Lens platform, you can build these downstream tasks for classification, as David just mentioned, object detection, segmentation. There are other types of downstream tasks that we're working on as well, including image in-painting, image super resolution, few-shot learning approaches, and anomaly detection.
Yep. So how do you consume the large vision model, right? The easiest way to consume and to utilize a large vision model is by using our off-the-shelf computer vision platform, Landing Lens. Again, it makes it super easy for subject matter experts like oncologists to perform visual inspection tasks. Of course, you can also consume the large vision model yourself in your environment, whether that be, on the edge, in virtual private cloud, on-prem via Docker. One other thing that doesn't go without saying, the large vision model itself can be trained on-prem on your compute. When dealing with medical and patient data, sometimes that's a hard requirement, and that's also another benefit of large vision models.
So how do you begin the LVM journey with Landing AI? Well, let's first kind of recap what we've discussed. So a domain-specific large vision model, DSLVM, is really a foundation model that is generalized for a category of computer vision data. And then you'll build downstream use cases on top of that. So speaking metaphorically, I think of it kind of like a doctor that has a familiar sense of dermatology. But when you train a downstream task, what you've done is become an expert in a specific type of thing. So it could be like a melanoma. Each of these downstream tasks leverages the broad understanding of dermatology, but the specific training of melanoma identification is what happens when you fine tune. This rapid development process of these downstream vision tasks leads to significant benefit for the business at all stages of product lifecycle development and commercialization, and allows you to deploy these models anywhere that you like. It could be in our Landing Lens platform, which is, again, end-to-end development environment for downstream tasks, and deploy it ultimately to edge environments, which could be your own Docker environment or utilizing our edge software itself. And you can begin working with us by essentially sharing data and beginning the process of developing an LVM.
Finally, we want to offer no-cost consulting with Landing AI. Basically, it's a call to assess your application. Since no two vision projects are ever identical verbatim, we welcome a direct conversation with you about your use cases, whether it's inspecting injectables for particulates to comply with USP 790, to checking medical surgical tools for consequential scratches, and everything in between, right? We serve them all. It is a general purpose computer vision platform we have in Landing Lens, and large vision models are tailored to whatever it is you are doing in your business. And without further ado, that does take us right to the Q&A. Adrian, do you want to take over for this part to moderate the Q&A?
Yeah. Let me go ahead and we have some questions from the audience here. What type of cameras are needed for LVM? Static cameras, or can you utilize cameras on mobile devices?
David, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll go first. So we are image agnostic. We're spectra agnostic. It doesn't matter to us where the image came from. Our whole business model is based on your unstructured visual data. So 2D images, they can come from things like smartphones. The best performance is often achieved with repeatable images, say from a machine vision system, if you're inspecting widgets, that are being produced. Having them relatively in the same area at the same, from the same perspective will yield better results. You may need more image data if you use, say, mobile devices or some other non-static image formation approach.
Yeah, I'd just add one other point. In a lot of the R&D processes, this could be microscopes where you're capturing the images. The images can be stored in any of your cloud environments and connected to us. We can talk through some of that if there's interest. And at the end of the day, the large vision model should be trained on a large variety, so that the images, as David mentioned, we're typically talking about initially at least 100,000 images. That's our rough guidance. And that data set should be diverse and varied. Ultimately, when you train the LVM, you've trained it to understand, generalized features across all of those images. And when you get to fine tuning the downstream models, again, you'll want some consistency with the images. They should be in the same domain if you're going to leverage the LVM. But the resolution can vary. The types of training that's required will depend on the type of project. And typically, if you're doing something like object detection or classification, that's done very simply within the Landing AI platform. You can also import any of the labeled data that you might already have elsewhere in the organization.
Excellent. Next question. Can Landing Lens be used to review documents with text and images that are related, engineering drawings and specifications as an example?
I'm happy to take this one. I've served this use case across a couple of different disparate industries, whether it's diagrams representing, the construction of a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant, to architecture, engineering, and construction, like BIM type information for a new build and general purpose construction. The short answer is yes. We can review those types of documents that do contain text and images. For instance, if there's a feature like a window or a door that you want to consistently identify, we can read those diagrams better than a human more consistently, right? We'll identify every single instance of window or door. As well, we can process with optical character recognition the text that may be associated with that window or door. Hopefully the parallels are resonating with you in your industry and whatever it is specifically you're doing. But the short answer is yes, we can absolutely read those types of diagrams and drawings better than humans. You may not even need a large vision model for that, but again, that's where we welcome a direct dialogue with you about the specifics of your use case. Anything to add, Erik?
No, I think you nailed it. What's the next question, Adrian?
Can Landing Lens take a video as an input and train the machine on the video information?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. Today, what we would typically do, whether it be video or DICOM, is we would take slices or frames from the video, so basically 2D representation, and train the model on that. And then ultimately, when you build a downstream task, it has the same effect.
Excellent. David, did you want to
Get
add
another
anything to
question,
that?
Adrian?
Yes. Are you able to work with gigapixel sized histology images out of the box?
The answer is yes to that. So again, for histopathology, this is a use case that we're quite comfortable with. We understand that the images are very, very, very large. One of the downstream tasks that David was describing, where you use essentially a RAG approach to search within images, is based on this idea that histopathology images are very, very large, and it's difficult to identify patches within the image itself. And so we train the model on very, very large images, and then we are able to deliver the downstream models as well on very, very large images. Using something like the similarity search approach that David described, you can really make navigating something like a very, very large image much, much easier and contextual.
Great. This one's around pricing. Actually, it's two questions. Let me start with the first one. How long can you use the free software, and how much cost for runtime?
You
I'm
want to take
happy.
that, David?
Yeah, absolutely. So the great news is for hobbyists, tinkerers, academics, general curiosity, you can get started for free right now with Landing Lens with our free trial on our website. It's ideal for making some initial tests. The second option we have, it's $50 a month for our visionary plan. That enables you to have some additional credits, additional users. It can be found at landing.ai/pricing. There is a little asterisk there. Those are for non-commercial use. For commercial use, we welcome a direct dialogue with you about, a tailored enterprise plan that can meet your needs. Can meet your needs in terms of the number of active projects that you want to have and be able to download models from, massive numbers of credits, right? We would welcome those direct conversations with you. Anything to add, Erik?
Yeah, I think I will just address the runtime part of the question. So when you deploy a model, you have a couple of options. You can deploy it to a cloud endpoint, and the predictions that come off that cloud endpoint that's hosted by us uh, decrement this credit balance that David is alluding to. So it really depends on how many inferences and predictions you're making on the cloud endpoint. Alternatively, you can deploy the downstream task to any kind of edge environment. I think I saw a question in here about like what types of edge environments do we include. Docker is a common deployment option, so you would orchestrate that with Kubernetes and run it on any of your proprietary compute or cloud environments. This could also run locally on a machine like a robot. Um, and the commercial aspect for edge deployment is different than the cloud endpoints. It doesn't utilize the credit model that we talked about a moment ago.
Excellent. We have a host of questions, so let me start, take some more here. Give me 1 second. One, can landing AI serve on-prem use cases? My medical data cannot leave my premises. Oh, go ahead. Can you guys answer that?
Yeah, I'll take a first pass. So, yes, absolutely. So, for large vision models, as I mentioned before, you can either have it trained by Landing AI on our compute. We can train it on-prem on your compute infrastructure. So, the answer is yes for LVMs. And then going to our off-the-shelf platform, Landing Lens, the answer is also yes. You can currently train your model in our cloud, in the cloud with Landing Lens, and then deploy it to the edge, deploy it on-prem via Docker. So you can take your model with you and create your own custom UI or have it run embedded inside of your device or your local compute infrastructure. To go one further, I will mention there's Snowflake has posted recently about some interesting things in our partnership. That's going to open up a whole realm of new possibilities. Stay tuned on that front. Erik, anything to add?
No, I think you got it.
Next question. What kind of platforms are supported for inferencing, especially at edges?
So that's kind of what I was speaking to a moment ago. It's really hardware agnostic on the edge. It's a containerized deployment, typically through Docker. We also have a specific edge software that runs on Windows and Linux for downstream task deployment. That tends to fall more into the use cases that are related to manufacturing quality and the commercialization phase for life sciences. If you look at model deployment, say in the R&D process, and you're looking at deploying to an edge device there, again, that would probably be a Docker deployment.
Excellent. Anything to add, David, before I go to the next question?
No, go on ahead, please. Thank you.
Do any of these interfacing platforms have the ability to utilize a trained LVM model on real-time microscopy video feed so that if I feed it 20,000 images of prostate cancer cells, then when I'm doing a real-time review of prostate biopsy with videos, it can detect a real-time image? Do I repeat that?
Yeah, no, I think I got the spirit of it. Real-time microscopy using video, absolutely. Again, we would train the LVM on the domain. So, like, let's say it was like a histopathology kind of LVM. That would be the domain of data. We'd create a downstream task for it could be object detection, it could be segmentation. Ultimately, those choices for the downstream tasks are going to be up to you. And then when you deploy that, you can deploy it to an edge environment. And a lot of the performance in terms of the inferencing speed and things like that are going to be a function of where it's deployed and what kind of compute supports that. But it can be done very, very quickly for this near real-time experience that you're describing with microscopy video.
Yeah, and I'll go one further and say some of my manufacturing clients who are, video is a time series of images. They're using Landing Edge, which is rated at 30 inferences per second, 30 frames per second. I've seen it for a specific use case benchmarked up to about 70 inferences per second. And of course, with a more optimized model, we could probably go faster. But again, we welcome that as a direct dialogue. You can see the specs for Landing Edge at our in our support. I think it's support.landing.ai is the URL.
Excellent. Next two-part question. Does the model work on multiple IHC or multiple IF data only H&E image? Do you want me to restate that?
I don't think so. I think that's a question that's going to require some follow-up from us. So maybe what we can do is record an answer to that and provide that to the attendees after the meeting.
Great.
Ditto.
Second part of that question. How long does a model take to detect cells on a whole slide image?
So again, that's back to my earlier point about the downstream task. So it's a function of where it's deployed and what kind of compute is supporting the downstream model. Ultimately, that compute horsepower really dictates inferencing speed locally. And then, of course, there's the other question is, what is the model weight itself and how does that contribute to performance? It really is a function of the size of the images that were used for training the model, the downstream task model, and where it's deployed. But in short, it should be very, very quick, near real time for most use cases that even involve very, very large images. I think I saw in the text in the chat there was some question about the size of images that go into the LVMs. Ultimately, the LVM is going to be learned to get generalized on the data set. So the model training process is something that Landing AI does for the LVM. And so we can take very, very large images and build the LVM to derive the the weights and biases for the LVM itself. And then when you build and deploy the downstream tasks, that inherits the generalized understanding from the LVM, but creates a unique set of weights and biases for the task itself. So there's sort of two parts to that, right? I mean, ultimately, the LVM has no limitation in terms of the size and scale of the images. We'll work with you to understand the specific use case. And then secondly, when you create the downstream task, that has the possibility of using very, very large images as well. But it may get to a point where it has some limitation in terms of performance if you don't have the right kind of compute and in your deployed environment.
Yeah, I'll expand on that and add a final thought. For massively large images, say someone asked a question, 15,000 by 15,000 pixels. If you're looking for a feature that's only 10 by 10 pixels in a 15,000 by 15,000 pixel image, some pre-processing can really help optimize the results. That is subdividing it up with overlap. We've got some pre-processing options. Again, happy to have that dialogue with you and expand on just how we would implement that if you have a massively large image with very small features inside it that you'd like to detect.
Excellent. Next two-part question. What would be the best way for individual users to get started to understand landing AI before we bring this to our team at work? Is there a hands-on guide?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the best way is what David said. You can start by going to our website, and you'll find lots of different ways to move towards a free trial experience. I think if you begin with Landing Lens, you'll understand what the capabilities of these downstream tasks are like. Ultimately, the Landing Lens platform that we've been talking about ships with a foundation model, a proprietary model that allows us to build these downstream tasks very quickly, and it does a pretty good job in a lot of use cases. Why LVM is really about a bespoke foundation model for your domain of images, and gives you additional benefits in terms of both performance and cost when you build the LVM itself. David, anything to add?
No, you nailed it.
Also, is there some synthetic data that we can try?
In the Landing Lens platform, there are sample data sets that can be used for different model types. And I think that's probably the spirit of this question. LVMs, we talked about some of the downstream task types, and I think I talked about image in painting, and anomaly detection. Once you've trained an LVM on a domain, some of the things that you can do downstream could include creation of synthetic data. It could include labeling a downstream task with synthetic data. And so ultimately, I think really it requires a conversation for us to understand, what the spirit of that is all about.
Yeah, and I'll echo that by saying, really, the way our computer vision platform works, it's about your image data. If you have synthetic images already simulating defects or, cancerous cells, you can ingest those into our platform and train an AI model. We don't have like a, generic data set. It's about your image. It's about your data. You train that in our platform, and then you output a model that is yours to take and deploy as you see fit.
Excellent. Next one is, give me a second here. My system must be validated for GXP compliance.
Yeah, so good manufacturing processes is a core part of what we do. We have a validation ready solution for our platform. It will help you with the necessary documentation and compliance with FDA regulatory controls. I think that's probably the essence of it all.
Excellent. I'm going to go over these and make sure we captured these. Let me know if we already did. How is the performance of LVMs better than CNNs?
So again, you don't interact directly with the LVM. You interact with the head, which is the downstream task typically. So the LVM is a generalized understanding of the domain, and it leads to an easier process to create a performant downstream model. Those downstream models are deep learning models, and they typically are CNNs. Ultimately, the performance of those downstream tasks is a function of the types of images, the type of project that you're trying to create, and where and how you've deployed it. And so performance is really a function of the specific use case. I think broadly speaking, both the LVM and the downstream tasks are, because they're deep learning, they're really all about dealing with subjectivity and variation. They both will do that really, really well. And the downstream task will, again, inherit the generalized understanding of the domain. So, typically you'll get model convergence that's very, very fast when you go through the training process for the downstream tasks. And you'll often see, F1 scores that are, way north of 98%, depending upon the task.
Excellent. David, there was a question you really wanted to answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw a question from an attendee. What's the maximum speed for object detection in milliseconds? So I'm going to answer that in a different way. The short answer is it's impossible to answer without you ingesting your images and making a test. Again, that's where the free trial comes in. The way it works, if you're running inference in the cloud, usually those use cases are slower than, say, 1 inference per second. So if you're inferencing generally slower than once per second, you can run inference in the cloud and have no problems. I'll say every single one of my manufacturing clients globally, they are running for manufacturing inspection use cases, they're running, say, an object detection model using landing edge, so on their local edge compute. And again, landing edge can go, it's rated at 30 inferences per second. I could pull up the calculator and make a quick calculation, but hopefully that answers your question. As well, you can also deploy it via Docker to further optimize it and create your own UI and really make it as optimal as possible. But you will need to export the model from the cloud-based landing lens to your local compute infrastructure if you need those types of speeds.
Erik, did you want to add anything?
No, no. I see another question. Can the LVM detect DICOM imagery in its raw DICOM format? The answer is today we will train on the slices in the DICOM stack, and then produce inferences on the individual 2D layers. There is, I think, some development going on in-house at Landing AI that would lead us to full DICOM support, but that's not today. It's somewhere down the road.
Excellent. Do the same image size resolution limitations apply to LVMs? What if we have an extremely large image, and you may have already addressed this, large image 15,000 by 15,000 that cannot be cropped?
I think I answered that one earlier. I think that was from Ray. The answer is you can use very, very large images like this 15K by 15K without cropping it to train the LVM. And then, as David said, when you create the downstream tasks, you'll have some optionality. So as an example, you could tile this large image. You could address each of the individual tiles separately. You could do something like the similarity search using RAG approaches where you hone in on a specific region of the image and then use an ensemble approach to these models where you could address just the part of the image that you're focused on. So there's a number of answers, but there shouldn't be any limitation in terms of like training the LVM itself.
Okay. Let me just check one last question. Make sure we answered it. What are examples of edge devices where the LVMs can be deployed? Did we address that one already?
Yeah, I think we did. It really can be anything that can support Docker. It could be a robot. It could be a local cloud compute resource. It could be, in David's example, landing edge deployment on a Windows or Linux machine locally. Um,
Yeah, I'll add to that. I see another question about, does Landing AI have an API for automation for integration? Landing Edge was built out of the manufacturing industry, and it connects directly to your PLCs, your MES, your local, system as you're manufacturing your products. That's what it's designed for. So the short answer is yes. And again, if you have specific questions, we can take those as a follow-on.
Yeah, I see in that same question, I think, there's one other thing I guess I'd add about the API. So we have a REST API that's part of our software development kit. There's a Python library and a number of other technical resources. You can view that on our website and find the documentation around that. But then also there was a second part of that was about the embeddings that get created for the similarity search. And so the LVM itself, when you create the LVM, that would allow you to create the embeddings, and we would work with you to do that.
Excellent. This will bring us to a close for our Q&A. Erik, David, any final comments? Anything you wanted to address before we close this out?
Yeah, I'll just say we welcome that direct conversation with you. It's about your business, your use cases. Every use case is a little bit different. And since LVMs are bespoke to your data set, let's have that dialogue directly. Look forward to chatting with you guys.